He's the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, who joins us this morning. Commissioner, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning, Dan.
What kind of basketball game did you have growing up?
Not much. I enjoyed playing, but mainly a playground player.
If you played against Commissioner Stern, who would win?
I would easily. He's got a bad wheel. I just saw him last night. He's got a bad wheel. He's been limping around a little bit lately. I think he's got to have his knee operated on again. So
Okay.
I would definitely take him.
What about in his prime?
I don't know. He used to brag in the office about these lawyers' leagues he used to play in. So I don't know. I could just see him, that old Mark Jackson move, backing me down.
Well, there's a Dellavedova quality to Commissioner Stern as well. You know, that gritty, gutty guy on the court. He strikes me as he's not going to give in.
You're right. It would be close.
All right.
I would win, though.
A couple of things here. How close of an eye are you keeping on Vegas with what happened with the NHL?
I am keeping a close eye on it. I mean, it's a market that we've been playing our summer league in for at least the last 10 years, so we've been there every July. You know, I've been to the new arena that AEG just built there, and I think it's a great market. We're not in expansion mode, so we're not. It's not something that we're even thinking about right now, but it's based on what I've read. The NHL is on their way, and even our old owners, the Maloofs, seem to be involved, the old owners of the Sacramento Kings. And so, I know the people of Vegas love their sports. I think one of the issues is the size of the television market. I mean, that matters a lot more for the NBA and the NHL than it would for the NFL, for example, because all the NFL games are national. And I know that's something that they continue to study, and it's a different kind of market when it comes to season ticket holders, because at least in our league, usually the bar for success for our teams is at having at least 10,000 season ticket holders. Mm-hmm. And my sense is Las Vegas may not be as conducive to the traditional model for a team where you build it on season ticket holders as opposed to having to resell 20,000 seats every night. But on the other hand, they have this huge base of tourists, and especially I know for our league, one of the things we've looked at for Vegas is the number of international tourists that come to that town. And as we get more popular in Asia and Europe, and in other parts of the world, a lot of people from those markets are constantly traveling into Vegas, so that would be one of the attractions as well.
Talking to the commissioner, Adam Silver, joining us, Dan Patrick Show. You're going to be in Cleveland tonight?
Absolutely.
Where are you sitting?
I'm sitting, usually we sit about 12 rows up or so, usually in the center. So generally our seats are facing the benches, sort of at the same angle that the television viewer gets, sort of sitting up behind where the announcers sit.
So no courtside seats for you?
No courtside. Courtside. Although I love sitting courtside, I don't often get to do that. I've always said I think the courtside seat in the NBA is the best seat in all of sports. I think in part because you can feel the game in a different way. You obviously can hear the exchanges between the players. You know from sitting down on the floor when you've been covering the games. I will say, though, when you're up a little bit, sometimes it gives you a little bit better angle. I've noticed that most of the scouts in the NBA tend to sit up a little bit, not up in the rafters where I hear the NHL scouts sit because they want to be able to see the full ice. But I find if you're up, 10, 15 rows, it helps you get a little bit of better court sense when you see how the plays are unfolding.
I don't know if you...
So I have good seats. I have nothing to complain about.
Good. I don't know if you followed Reggie Miller when he tweeted out that he suggested that Draymond Green doesn't get suspended if the series was tied at 2 instead of a 3-1 Golden State lead. Jeff Van Gundy came on the show and said he agreed with Reggie. Your reaction to that when you saw that or heard about that?
I saw it, and I disagree with both of them. I think, first of all, it's just to be absolutely clear, we did not suspend Draymond Green. We upgraded an act on the floor to a flagrant one. As Draymond has acknowledged, he put himself in that situation. By virtue of his having gotten a flagrant one, he exceeded the number of flagrant points you could get throughout the playoffs and not get suspended. So in other words, once he got the flagrant one, having already had 3 flagrant foul points throughout the playoffs, that put him over the limit, and he was automatically suspended for the next game. And so then the question becomes, should we have not have given him the flagrant One, knowing that the outcome would be for him to be suspended. And I can only imagine what people would have said on the other side of the argument had we not given the flagrant when we saw an act. To Draymond's credit, he acknowledged it. There was no dispute as to what happened. The referees did not see it on the floor. There's also no question they didn't see it and decided it wasn't a flagrant. They didn't see that act when he swiped over at LeBron and hit him in the groin area, and that is a flagrant in our league. I will say in the case of Draymond, I think he knows it, that he wasn't about to get the benefit of the doubt either based on his prior conduct. And the purpose of that rule, and by the way, in terms of Reggie, or Jeff Van Gundy, I'm fine with the conversation if people want to disagree with it, but the theory behind having, in essence, progressive discipline by having it act in a cumulative way was to disincentive guys from committing those acts over and over again. And it's one of the reasons why we don't reset after every round of the playoffs. We don't want guys to think, all right, I got a few flagrants I can get. Yeah. Oh, great, now I can start over. I'll get a few flagrants more. As you know, the genesis of these rules, and by the way, for those who've been criticizing these rules, they've been in place for about 20 years now. And the purpose of these rules was to cut down on the amount of fighting on the floor. As you know from the old days in the NBA, fights used to break out all the time. I know you can have the images of David Stern courtside. There's some great video of him where players are spilling into the stands. Other times where they're showing the look on his face as players are swinging punches at each other. And the idea was there's no place in our game for that. And so one of the ways we felt we could crack down on that, and I was at the league at the time these rules were put in place, was to highly disincentivize guys from committing flagrant fouls, which can lead to players retaliating. And even Draymond's so-called swipe, he even acknowledges he's doing that in retaliation for LeBron standing over him.
Is the groin different, though, Commissioner? And I'm not, being lighthearted with this, but that area is different than if he took a swipe at his back or his knee or his ankle?
Yeah, yes. The head and groin are different and always have been in this league. And you have to assume that there's a reason, too, why players take shots at other players' groins or possibly their heads, as opposed to a guy's back. And I'd say where Draymond loses the benefit of the doubt here is, let's just say that, and I'm not saying Draymond said this, that LeBron just happened to turn at the last second and he hit him in the groin instead of the stomach or instead of the shoulder. And the fact is, this has been conduct that has been ongoing throughout the playoffs. And again, that's the purpose of these rules. And it was, for us at the league office, the last thing we want to do, of course, is impact the competition by suspending a player, especially during a fantastic finals like this. But we have to call him as we see him. And again, I hear Reggie and Jeff Van Gundy, but the notion we sit around the league office, do we take a big gulp and say, we're adding up the flagrant points, and this is a flagrant one, that means he's at 4, that means he gets suspended. Of course we're aware of that, but I just can only imagine if we had said, he did it, but it's such a great matchup. It's unfair to the fans to have to lose an all-star player in the middle of a great series like this. We won't do it. There would have been just as much outcry from the other side.
The Hack-A-Shaq, it's tough watching Tristan Thompson go to the line and act like he can shoot free throws there. We've seen this with DeAndre Jordan and Andre Drummond, and I know that it's being addressed.
Right.
But what would be a simple solution to make basketball look better, not have this moment in the game or games?
The simplest solution would be to take the rule we now have in effect for the last 2 minutes of the game, which, by the way, was put into effect in 1978. So this notion guys got to make their free throws, that line was crossed, more than 30 years ago, of the sense that, that's part of the game, so therefore just let guys shoot free throws regardless of how bad they are. But so there was a decision made in 1978 that to change the rule for the last 2 minutes, where you automatically go to the line and take the ball out, if you're fouled, if there's an intentional foul away from the ball in the last 2 minutes, and you could take that rule and put it in place for the entire game. One thing I want to point out, and I acknowledge I was on the fence on making this change 2 years ago. Last summer, I said I was getting closer to thinking we needed to do something, but let's watch another season. And yet this season, it's up 2.5 times again off last season. The use of this technique is up 16 times in the last 5 years. But one thing worth pointing out, that even in terms of some of those players you just mentioned, like DeAndre Jordan and Dwight Howard, big men who are notoriously bad free throw shooters, roughly 2/3 of the free throws those guys still take involve plays around the ball. In other words, I think there's sometimes some confusion. Even you probably remember this when the expression Hack-A-Shaq was originally coined. It had to do with fouling Shaq every time he touched the ball. Mm-hmm. It wasn't go chase Shaq to the opposite end of the floor and foul him when he has nothing to do with the play. It evolved to that. But my only point being that if a guy's a bad free throw shooter and he's still in the game, regardless of whether it's in the last 2 minutes or any point in the game, the other team is still going to look to foul that guy if they think there's an advantage to putting him on the line. So you're still going to see that. What we'd love to do away with, or what I'd like to do away with, is that notion like we saw Tristan Thompson in the last game, that the technique Steve Kerr was using, where sending Barbosa down all the way to the other end of the court, waving his hands, look, I'm grabbing him, I'm fouling him. Mm-hmm. I'd say that was not a traditional part of the game. When the rule was changed in 1978, it had become part of the game in the last 2 minutes, and it was eradicated. But then smart coaches, analytics folks, others figured out there might be a benefit to using it at other points in the game, and that's what's happened. I now think that we need to make the change. It's just ugly. In terms of the argument that guys got to make their free throws, guys still will need to make their free throws. There's still enormous incentive to need to make your free throws, because again, if you're a bad free throw shooter, presumably the coach on the other team is still going to instruct players at certain key moments to try to foul that guy. And lastly, I think this is a fascinating statistic. Over the course of the last 50 years, free throw percentages in the league have remained at almost exactly 75%. It's almost quite, counterintuitive. You would think with all the great coaching techniques and analytics and new approaches to shooting that somehow that free throw shooting would have gotten better over the years. And it's one of the few apples to apples comparisons you can make over time, because it's just a guy on a line with the basketball trying to shoot a free throw. And my only point in saying that is that we haven't, this notion guys just got to get better at shooting free throws actually isn't borne out by the data, that bad free throw shooters are going to be bad free throw shooters. And in a league of 420 players or so, you're always going to have some bad free throw shooters. And lastly, I get it, for some teams, there's no doubt if you don't have DeAndre Jordan, if you don't have Dwight Howard, if you don't have one of these guys who's a notoriously bad free throw shooter, your view is, I don't want to change the rule because I'm giving those teams an advantage. And I think that's the biggest obstacle to changing the rule, because teams understandably want to vote their self-interest. And I'd only say there that we've looked at it up and down. We've had all the analytics people look at it, and it's only a very slight advantage. I think if we take away the rule, it's only a slight advantage to those teams, because once again, those guys are still going to get fouled in key moments. They just have to be fouled when they're in the midst of a basketball play, as opposed to being on the other side of the floor.
Commissioner, safe travels there, and enjoy the game. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, that's Adam Silver, NBA Commissioner.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.